Hi, Autumn. How are you?
Good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How's your day been so far?
It's been really good. I think we've had some really exciting meetings, and I'm interested to see how we can best serve this client's needs. Were you able to get a chance to look over the memo?
Yeah, I actually just got done reading over it, and my mind goes to so many different things when we're talking about employment. I mean, right off the top of my head, it makes me think of Title VII, which has so many different issues surrounding it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I know COVID has really changed the landscape of employment, so I'm interested to see what that looks like. I think we should maybe just go through our regular model before we bring the client in. I think I'll talk about conflicts of interest and confidentiality, and then you can briefly explain any information the client needs to know so that they understand their legal rights while they're talking to an attorney. And then we can pretty much give the client the floor for the rest of the session. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think that sounds good. And if you want, I can do the note taking so I can send out a memo after the meeting.
That works. And while you're doing that, I'll try to come up with those creative solutions on the side for our client and see if we can bring them into that collaborative process as well.
Okay, that sounds good. Should we invite the client in?
Yeah, I think we're ready to bring the client in.
Perfect. Hi, Dr. Johnson, how are you?
Sorry about that. This Zoom stuff is still very new to me. I can't always figure it out.
Oh my gosh, you're totally fine. I feel the same way. I find myself muted half the time. How's your day been so far?
It's fine. It's fine. It's a busy time of year.
I totally understand that. Well, hopefully your weekend will get better. Once we're done with this meeting, I'll just go ahead and start by introducing myself. My name is Libby Spann. This is my partner, Autumn Brehon. We've been in practice together for about 10 years now, and we're really looking forward to getting to know more about your issue today. We have a couple of housekeeping matters that we like to go over before we turn it over to you, and I'll pass it off to Autumn and let her tell you about those.
Thank you so much, Libby. So again, as Libby said, my name's Autumn. We're both pretty informal around here. You can call me Autumn. Feel free to call Libby Libby. Would you like to be addressed as Dr. Johnson or by another name or title?
Avery's probably fine. Yeah, sure.
Okay. Thank you so much, Avery. So again, my name's Autumn Brehon. Generally, we like to take the first 3 to 5 minutes with clients just to give them a high-level overview of their rights when speaking to an attorney. So we're going to spend the first 3 to 5 minutes doing that. Once Libby and I finish sharing that information with you, the floor will pretty much be yours just to share your experience and your information so that we can make sure that we're best meeting your legal needs. How does that sound, Avery?
That sounds fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the first thing that we would like to talk to you about are what we call conflicts of interest. The easy way that Libby and I explain conflicts of interest to clients is that if two individuals were to get into a fight, Libby and I can't represent both parties in that fight. We have to pick one side. And so with the information that you provided in your consultation before the meeting, we were able to do a preliminary conflicts of interest check to make sure that we can fully and fairly represent your legal matter. So at this time, there aren't any conflicts of interest. But if Libby and I stop you and say, I'm sorry, what was the full name of that person? Or what was that business again? That's just us making sure that there's no conflict so that we can fully and fairly represent your legal matter. Do you have any questions this far on conflicts of interest?
I don't think so. I think I understand that fine. Thank you.
Thank you. And confidentiality is the last thing that I want to talk to you about this afternoon. Confidentiality essentially means that anything that you share with Libby and myself is private and it's confidential and it stays between us. It's very hard. That information exists in a vault of secrecy, and it's hard for someone to break into that vault. One easy way for that vault to get broken into is if you shared the contents of this meeting with individuals outside of this meeting. Generally, what this looks like is a client will say, oh, well, this also involves this other person or someone else was impacted by this issue. Can I talk to them? And generally, we'll follow up after the consultation and re-answer that question. So at this time, do you have any questions or concerns about confidentiality?
So I presume just like when I'm working with my patients, that you can't share what I tell you any more than I could share what a patient tells me.
Precisely. And it's also the same. There's some doctor confidentiality in the legal world, and there's also legal confidentiality that you share with Libby and myself, should you choose to hire us as your attorneys. So it's that same type of confidentiality.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm glad I was able to clarify that for you. And we have about 2 or 3 more minutes left in that chunk that we said we would take, those 3 to 5 minutes. So I'll turn it over to Libby. She'll provide you a few more pieces of information, and then we'll really get started hearing your issue. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Autumn. Avery, we just want to start by saying thank you so much for paying that consultation fee. That really just that Autumn and I get to have these 45 minutes to spend just one-on-one with you, learning about what's going on and helping you hopefully find a solution today and, get a path of next steps to take. I won't get too much into our fee structure. Autumn and I generally like to find out what's going on. And then at the end of our meeting, I will circle back and give you a little bit more information on that. Does that sound all right with you?
Sure, that sounds fine.
Perfect. I've got 2 last little things to go over. The first one is if you see Autumn and I looking down, we're not being rude or trying to ignore you. It's probably because we're taking notes. After this meeting, I'll be sending you a memo that recaps everything I've told you and everything that you've told us. So I'm going to be taking very diligent notes. And that leads me to my second point. I apologize in advance if we may have to interrupt you to ask a clarifying question. We just want to make sure that we're fleshing out all the necessary facts to help you get a legal solution to your issue today. Do you have any questions for us before I turn it over to you?
And so just to make sure, if you take notes or you write things down, those are also covered by confidentiality, just like anything I say would be?
Yes, ma'am. That's considered work product, so it will be completely confidential. It will not leave this room.
Okay.
Perfect. All right. If you don't have any more questions, then why don't you just tell us what brought you in today?
Well, I'm here because there's been a recent policy change at the big university hospital that's going to really affect a whole swath of physicians in the area, potentially including myself. And I think that something needs to be done because it's unfounded. It's not based in science, and it could have, like I said, huge implications. So I'm hopeful that you're going to be able to show me the path forward to have the policy either rescinded or, or something, because it's totally unacceptable.
Can you tell us a little bit more about this policy?
Sure. So we got word. I'm in private practice, but like many private practice physicians, I have hospital privileges at the large university hospital. We also have privileges our practice does at other local hospitals, but most of our patients are seen at the university hospital. And we've recently gotten information that they're going to start basically requiring testing of doctors over a certain age in order to maintain our privileges at the hospital.
Okay, that sounds really scary. I'm sorry to hear that. Thanks for bringing this issue to our attention. Libby, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, that's okay. I have a feeling we're probably on the same page. Avery, when you say testing, what do you mean by testing?
Well, so they say they're going to subject physicians over 70 to both cognitive and neurological testing in order to maintain our privileges, to determine our level of fitness. With the notice, it came with one study that suggests that doctors over a certain age have an increased number of med mal complaints made against them, but it's one study. And that's all it said. We don't have any information about when the testing is going to occur, how often it's going to occur, whether it's going to be every year. We don't know what happens with the results of this testing. So it's, like I said, it's a real problem because I'm not going to be the only person affected.
Okay, I want to zoom in really quickly before we zoom out. Avery, I know we're never supposed to ask this of a woman, but I am going to ask your age, and I'm asking because it might define if we could bring a claim for your legal rights or remedies. So how old are you?
I'm 69 years old, and so I will be 70 next year, and that's why this is a real concern for me.
Can you talk a little bit about what your practice does? What type of medicine do you practice?
Sure. I am in a private gastroenterology practice. So We deal with lots of GI issues, and many of our procedures are done at the hospital if we have patients that need to get admitted. And so I've been a physician for 40 years. I've been doing this work with the university hospital for just as long. And, of course, every doctor has occasional complaints made against them. I don't have any more, and our practice doesn't have any more than any other physician kind of in the ordinary practice of medicine. And so that's why it's not based on any kind of track record. It's not based on prior claims. It's not based on any other exposure the hospital has had as a result of my work there. It's purely age-based.
I can totally see how that can be frustrating when you've been in practice for 40 years, like you said, and then, right before you turn 70, they're going to implement this new policy. So I totally understand your frustration, and I hope that we're going to be able to get you some solutions today that leave you feeling a little better than when you came in. And we appreciate you sharing all this information with us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Libby, for leading us in. Avery, do you have a contract with the public university hospital?
So it's a large university hospital. It is a private hospital. It's not a public hospital.
Okay.
So it's affiliated with a private university. And we don't really have a contract. We just, we get privileges. And usually that is based on kind of fundamental, am I licensed in the state, right? So I already have licensing requirements. So as long as I maintain my licensure, there's little that would otherwise affect privileges. So this is why this is so unusual and new. And again, we're not getting it from the other hospitals, but if the university hospital, the kind of the biggest hospital in the area, is allowed to subject area physicians to this policy, it's just a matter of time before the smaller community hospitals do the same.
Right. And thank you for clarifying that it's a private hospital instead of public. That distinction does matter in the legal world. So thank you for clarifying that. To follow up, you said that there is no contract. However, if you are in compliance at the state level, you can generally be admitted. What does the process look like for renewal of those types of privileges, or do they just exist as long as you're in compliance?
Yeah, they really just exist as long as you're in compliance. We submit our licensure and our insurance information on an annual basis to the hospital to let them know that we have maintained compliance with state obligations. Obviously, if we let our malpractice insurance, our private malpractice insurance expire, then the hospital does not want us doing procedures in their hospital. But again, it's just kind of a check the box kind of form that we have complied with all the requirements.
And just so I'm making sure we're on the same page. So it sounds like you're hoping, I believe you said, to have this policy rescinded or possibly changed. What is your ultimate goal for today's meeting?
Well, ultimately, I want to make sure that I don't have to go through this testing, all right? Because if our practice were to lose its privileges at the hospital, it would be devastating. It would be devastating for our clients. I'm in a private practice of about 6 physicians. We all have privileges at the university hospital. And so I just think the policy, I want to make sure it doesn't actually go into effect. And if it were to be in effect, I want to make sure that any outcomes of any testing, is there some way to make sure that's not disclosed? I mean, isn't that a violation of my privacy if they subject me to some kind of test and then disclose that information? Is it going to be protected? Is it public knowledge that one loses their privileges? I mean, it's certainly, if I look for a doctor, I'm going to ask where they have privileges. So if there were some kind of negative outcome as a result of these tests, ultimately patients and the public would potentially know about that.
Okay. So based on where we're at right now in the conversation between you, myself, and Libby, it sounds like there are 3 potential issues that are going on at once. I just want to make sure I'm restating those so that we understand where we all are, and then we'll continue asking some more questions for a little bit, and then we'll recap and start going over some legal solutions. But right now, it sounds like you believe you're being treated differently because of your age, because there's a test that individuals who are 69 and younger are not being subjected to, that you are being subjected to, even though, as you stated, there is no data, at least on your record, that your performance for medical malpractice has been declining as your age increases. Is that correct for the first issue that we're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is totally random. There are plenty of other studies that have failed to find this like relationship, this one-on-one relationship between age and potential malpractice claims. I mean, Dr. Fauci is 80 years old, for goodness sakes, and he's been in front of us every day for the last 2 years. So to have a hospital doing this is, really unacceptable.
Yeah, thank you so much for sort of confirming that. I think the media, people do love Dr. Fauci. I think you're making very strong points. So it does sound like there is a potential age discrimination issue that you're concerned about. It sounds like the second issue, which seems more secondary because, like you said, your goal is to have the policy rescinded or simply not apply to you. But a secondary issue is a privacy matter. Specifically, if individuals, not just yourself, but the people you care about in your practice, the individuals who are practicing medicine and trying to do good in their community, what will happen with these results? Will they be disclosed? And even if not, there might be a de facto disclosure once people see, oh, so-and-so is no longer admitted at this private hospital. So are we correct that privacy is also that second issue?
Absolutely. This is a huge concern of mine.
Okay. It sounds like a third issue that Libby and I are recognizing is something that you're not naming explicitly, but there is a potential due process issue. And what we mean when we say due process in this field is that you have a right to employment, you have a right to have a job, you have a right to practice medicine. You've gone through the steps, you have your license, you've been practicing for 40 years. And sometimes courts don't like when, as you said, there's a random or arbitrary way of taking that right away from someone. And so you also might have what we call a due process claim, where there's a literal process that entities need to go through if they're going to drastically impact someone's employment in that way. So you didn't bring that up explicitly, but that also is another option. I'm seeing your face. Do you have a question?
Well, I'm going to have to trust you on that one. Certainly, I've kept up all my licensure. I've done everything I'm supposed to do. So yes, maybe I have a process due claim or whatever you called that.
Yeah, let me rephrase that and then I'll hand it over to Libby. But essentially all that means is there are rules that entities have to follow if they're drastically going to impact your rights. And you do have a right to your job. You have a right to practice medicine. And so there may be some legal remedies there in terms of how this private hospital is changing or impacting your right. Because it sounds like individuals who can't pass that test won't be allowed to practice medicine in that hospital.
That's exactly right. And, there may come a time when, I'm not able to do my job as a physician, but, it just shouldn't be based solely on age. And I think that, one of the concerns I have in particular is, and it's something that I'm working through with my own partners at the private practice. But, there are lots of ways to practice medicine. So even when you can no longer maybe do the biopsies or do the colonoscopies or, do the things that require kind of a steady hand, there's still plenty of advice and counsel and client patient care that happens. And if I'm denied the ability to do that, even though I'm perfectly in a good frame of mind to do that, that's a huge problem. I mean, I'm one of the kind of big rainmakers in the practice, and I'm concerned what it's going to mean for the other doctors in the practice that this could be happening.
No, I totally understand, and we hear your concerns and see why that can be so frustrating and a big concern, because I totally see what you're saying. If you don't do surgery anymore, why can't I still go see patients in a room, So I have a question. I hear you say that you've spoken to some of the physicians within your practice. Have you spoken to anyone else about your concerns with this new policy?
Not really. The State Medical Society has been alerted to the fact that this university hospital is kind of has this new policy that they're going to start enforcing, and they are trying to decide whether they should get involved and what they might be able to do. I have not spoken with them directly. They have their own kind of policymakers within that medical society. So it's only been conversations that we've had as physicians, although I'm sure that those conversations are happening elsewhere. But there's only one particular person in my practice that I've talked to because of my personal concerns that I am particularly concerned about being made known to any kind of wider public.
Okay. And how I'm sorry.
No, keep going, Libby.
How did the university hospital let you guys know about this policy change? Was it a press release or?
Sure, we got it in the mail, and then it was also, we got it by email to the partners. So it was just a blast out to all physicians, I think, that have privileges that are not on the university hospital staff.
Okay.
So a few moments ago, Libby asked you what your goals were, and we understand that your goals are hopefully that this policy never comes into actual practice, but second, if it does, that somehow it doesn't apply to you. And third, if it somehow did, what does that look like in terms of your privacy rights? So we see those three tiers of your concerns. Some of the solutions to these concerns can involve going to court or litigating. That's not the totality of your solutions, but that is some of them. Would you be interested in litigation is the first question.
You know, I'm particularly concerned about this being made about me personally. I did have a recent diagnosis that ultimately may become a problem for me. But again, I'm talking to a particular partner in my practice. We're putting together a management plan to make sure that doesn't cause an issue for our patients, and to make sure that I can practice for as long as possible without this becoming an issue. So I am concerned that if we make it about me, it will not ultimately be in the best interest of the physicians in our area. So I would like it to kind of high level be about doctors over the age of 69 having to submit to this policy.
Okay. First, I'm sorry to hear about your diagnoses. I'm sure that just puts even more anxiety on the table for you, and I'm sorry about that. I saw Libby had a follow-up question. I did just want to briefly ask, are you a partner in your private practice?
Sure.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, Autumn, I was just going to see if now would be a good time to go ahead and recap all the facts. It seems like we really fleshed out all the preliminary information. Avery, like I mentioned, I'll be sending you a memo after this, just sort of recapping all of this. So after I'm done doing a summary, if I left anything out, or if you remember something else that you'd like to add, please feel free to let me know. We want to make sure that we're getting everything pertinent to this matter. So Dr. Johnson, it sounds like you've been a physician for 40 years. You're currently 69 years old, and you work in a private GI practice with about 6 other physicians. You have hospital privileges at the university hospital, which is a private hospital, as well as other hospitals in the area, but you see most of your patients at the university hospital. Recently, they let you know of a policy change that would be happening through mail and email regarding testing of doctors over the age of 70 for cognitive and neurological testing based off the results of one study that said that medical malpractice claims go up the older a physician gets. We see your concerns that they haven't given you very much information on how often this testing will be, what it's going to look like. You've had a recent diagnosis that is adding stress to this, as you feel like it may impact your ability to continue practicing in the future based off the uncertainty of this new policy change. And then we want to have the ultimate goal of not having this policy change implemented, and if it does, finding out a way that it wouldn't affect you and allow you to continue practicing until you choose to retire. Did I leave anything out?
No, if you can kind of do all those things, that would be great.
We're certainly going to try. We can't make any promises, but Autumn and I, we're a pretty good pair. So we're going to do whatever we can to help get you the best solution possible. We're definitely in your corner on this matter.
Thank you so much, Libby, for recapping. And thank you, Doctor, for just making sure that you're being candid and forthcoming with us. It's made this process smooth and really easy for us. So we really appreciate that. We're now going to just spend a few minutes talking about each of the issues that were raised in the consultation today and what we believe those potential solutions could look like, especially knowing even if litigation were something you were interested in, you don't want it to be something that's coming from you. You'd rather it be on behalf of several doctors.
Yes.
So the first thing that we'd like to talk about is the age discrimination that you believe that you're experiencing. And it sounds like we're calling that age discrimination because you believe that you're being treated differently based on your age because this policy does not apply to individuals who are under the age of 69. So we know that there are several protections for employment. However, some of those protections do not protect on the basis of age. So for example, there's something in the legal world something under the Civil Rights Act, for example, that we call 1981, but we know that that only protects individuals on the basis of race. And we know that Title VII does protect more individuals. However, age discrimination would not be covered under Title VII. And so we do want you to know that there are several protections for employees, but those two would not. And so what that does mean is that there are other options that we have that might not necessarily be needed to be something that goes into the courtroom to be litigated. It does sound like, though, the immediate next step between Libby, myself, and you is deciding how we would like to approach this private hospital, especially because it's not something that you want coming from on behalf of you, but coming on behalf of what we call in the legal world a class of doctors who are being negatively impacted by this policy. Do you have any questions on what I'm saying so far?
I don't think so. Now, I haven't told any of even though we've been talking about this within my practice, I didn't tell them that I was reaching out to attorneys. If we decided to go forward with some kind of class of doctors or group of doctors, would you need to tell them what I've told you about my personal condition?
No, everything that you've shared with us is confidential. If Libby and I did end up reaching out to those other doctors, we would again get that information from you. And in the legal world, we form what's called a class, which is a group of individuals who are all impacted by a policy in a very similar way. But we would never need to disclose any of the confidential information that you've shared with us. They don't become part of this private circle. They're just other individuals who are part of that class. So thank you for asking. Libby, I know you have a lot to add for this type of discrimination.
Yeah, definitely. I know you talked a little bit about Title VII and 1981 about the age discrimination. And just so you know, Avery, we do commonly see some defenses regarding age discrimination, which is called, it's a really big legal term, it isn't super important. It's just called the bona fide occupational qualification. And that's a mouthful, so I'm going to break it down. But you think about how pilots are forced to retire at 65 because of a safety hazard. They don't want people up there with bad eyesight. So typically corporations or employers will say that they're imposing a qualification, like, for example, the testing here, as a safety reason. That's like the retirement age for airline pilots and bus drivers, like I said. That could be a possible defense, but like Autumn is saying, I don't really see that coming into issue here. That's something we're definitely going to do more research on the case law regarding this, because it's constantly evolving, especially in today's age with medicine. So we're going to do more research on that area and get back to you regarding that.
Well, and if that were true, why just now? Why start imposing it now? Why don't other hospitals routinely impose this? I don't know what the basis is unless it's just this more recent study, even though there are other studies that are a little bit older not showing that correlation.
No, yeah. I completely understand the confusion surrounding that. And I think that's why Autumn is suggesting a possible meeting being a really good first start, because sometimes just fostering that communication can help solve a lot of these issues. The hospital may not be aware that people don't really understand because they haven't given out the information regarding the reasoning behind this policy other than that one study that was mentioned. So hopefully fostering a conversation can take place, but we understand the fact that you want to remain more anonymous and kind of out of the spotlight regarding this. Autumn, I did not mean to cut you off.
No, you never do. Avery, I love working with Libby because she and I are always on the same page, so it always works out. I want to move very quickly to the concerns that you had about privacy. So that's also something that Libby and I will immediately begin looking through the policy as we can find it online to understand what their rules are on privacy. We know that as a doctor, as anybody, as an employee, as somebody who's admitted to a hospital, there are matters that are supposed to remain private and between you and an employer. The first question for me and Libby is figuring out, one, is the hospital considered an employer? We know that you're admitted there, and we know that you have admitting privileges, but that'll be our first step on our end. And then our second step is really trying to determine, and honestly, the hospital might not know, they might not have thought on these questions yet, but what does happen with this information? Does it become private? I'm sure that individuals can look on the hospital website and see who's admitted. And so if somebody's looking 1 month and a doctor's admitted and on another month they're not, that does raise some privacy concerns. And so we totally hear you on that privacy matter. And that's definitely something that once Libby and I have our physical hands on a copy of that policy and we can comb through it, we can give you an answer on, one, what have they said? And if the hospital has not said anything, then we're willing to step in and engage with the hospital to understand, if they haven't said anything, what are they going to say? They need to write that policy.
Well, because even if they found something on one of these examinations and it meant that you didn't have privileges at their hospital anymore, like, could they give that information to my private malpractice insurance carrier? I mean, because if I were to lose my malpractice insurance, that's the end of my career. You can't practice medicine without insurance. So if that's made public, or if it's made available to insurance companies, that's it.
Can I follow up and ask, does the hospital generally share that certain types of employment information with your malpractice insurance company?
Nope.
If they don't, I do hear your fear, but if that's generally not an accepted practice, I would not think that they would be allowed to engage in that type of practice with that type of information if they're generally not allowed to communicate with your malpractice insurer in that way.
No, I mean, the only time there would be communication is if somehow I got sued for some procedure that happened in the hospital, and then the lawyers would all talk together and back and forth, and insurance companies back and forth, but nothing kind of personal to me would ever be disclosed from the hospitals where I have privileges back to my insurance carrier.
Okay, I was very nervous when I asked that question because I was scared that if you said yes, that could potentially bring an issue up with your privacy. But if it sounds like that's not the norm in practice, I feel comfortable saying I couldn't see that being the norm. But again, once Libby and I have our physical hands on a copy of that policy and can really comb through, again, the next two questions for us, what does the policy say so that we can let the good doctor know? But second, if there isn't a policy, that's when Libby and I can step up and talk to the hospital, because they do need to craft that policy for your privacy rights to make sure that you're protected in that way.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Libby, am I leaving anything out on the privacy matter?
No, I think you've covered everything that I have written down over here. So definitely on the same track today.
Thank you so much. And then the last issue, this one again is probably the most nebulous. It's the one that Libby and I will spend the most time researching. It's just whether or not you have a right to continue to practice in that private hospital without having to be subjected to these tests. And the way that we explained that earlier is you have a right to practice in that hospital. You have fulfilled all the requirements of your state. You have a right to practice medicine in that state. And so really digging into the legal principles on our side to see, can they do that? I wouldn't feel comfortable giving you a yes or no today, because I want to make sure that what I'm saying to you is true and that it's something you can rely on. So that would be probably the more nebulous issue. And I know Libby has a lot to say on this as well.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree on not being able to give a solid answer. We can kind of try to give you some preliminary information. We know since it's a private hospital that they can generally make up their own policies, but there are constraints, which is why it's important for us to go and do more research, because we don't want to give you an incorrect answer today when we can find possibly an exception or a case that really fits the facts, because I'm sure somewhere out there in the US, this has already happened before. And we want to find case law that helps you find the solution that you want today and hopefully go in feeling informed should you choose to end up speaking with your employers or the hospital themselves.
Generally at this time, Libby and I like to make sure the client understands once they leave here today, what's the immediate next step? What are they doing first? What are we doing first? But before we get to that, do you have any questions on what we've shared so far as it relates to potential age discrimination, your privacy rights, and your right to be able to practice medicine?
I don't think I have any questions, and nobody would take any next steps until we would meet again and you've gotten this additional information from me. So nobody's making any contact with the hospital or other people yet, right?
No, nobody's doing any of that, but we do know clients like to leave and think, well, if I hire them, what was that thing they said they were going to do first? And so we would want you to understand, based on your needs for privacy and you not wanting to put yourself in the spotlight in this way, should you choose to hire us, our immediate next step would be making sure that we talk to you to decide what other doctors might be interested in forming what we call in the legal world a class, a group of doctors who are maybe at 70 or about to be 70 who would be impacted.
Perfect. And I think this is a really good time just to remind you as well, just like you have confidentiality with your patients, again, want to remind you that Autumn and I aren't going to be making any decisions without you present. We're on your team. So if you don't want us to call anybody, we won't call anybody, even at subsequent meetings. You're kind of calling the shots here, and we want to value your privacy, and we have that confidentiality between attorney and client. So just please feel comforted knowing that we won't be making any decisions without you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. And then the immediate next step for you, doctor, and again, this is going to be in the email that Libby shares. Can you send us all the communications that you have? You can forward them in an email or print them off and bring them to our office. We would just like a copy of all of the communications that you've received thus far.
And do you want me to also forward the additional studies that we found that kind of are in contrast to the one study that the university hospital attached to the new policy?
Yeah, sure. That would be really helpful for Libby and I to understand the information that the hospital could have been working with or should have been working with when making those decisions. So thank you so much for that suggestion. Libby and I would love that.
And our general policy is anything that you think may be related to the matter, go ahead and send it over, because we'd rather have it and decide that it's not relevant rather than not getting it at all and missing something important. So anything you feel that we need to have, you can just send over to the paralegal that helps schedule your appointment today.
Okay.
Perfect. Autumn, I'll let you get back to it. Sorry for interrupting.
Oh, of course. I think that we've covered all three areas. I think that, Avery, you understand our next steps are going to be waiting to hear how you would like to proceed, if you would like to form what we call a class of individuals who might bring a claim. And then your immediate next step is to send over any of that communication to us. And it looks like you have another question I can see. So how else can we assist you?
You just said that you would wait to hear from me whether I wanted to form a class. And I'm not sure I have the information yet to make that determination.
No, thank you so much. Sometimes I skip a step when I'm explaining. The next step would be us deciding if you would like to proceed with essentially trying to force the hospital to change its policy. But because you don't want to be the one in the spotlight, we would try to see if we could get that group of doctors together, 69 or 70, so that we can sort of insulate you from that spotlight.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
No, thank you so much. And do you have any additional questions? Because if not, I think this will be a good time for Libby to sort of start closing us out.
Okay, no other questions at this time.
Okay, thank you, doctor.
Okay, perfect. Avery, as we promised, I would get back around to attorney's fees. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about our fee structures. We have two main fee structures. The first one is a retainer, which is basically just an upfront lump sum payment that we eat off of every time we do work on your file. Our other fee structure is hourly billing. We do bill at $250 an hour. In either case, you would be receiving a monthly statement about the work we have completed for your file and the total cost of services for that month. So the only difference would be when you were paying. Just so you know, our practice is not to double bill. So if Autumn and I were both on a phone call or both attending a meeting, we would not both be billing you at $250 an hour. It would just be one billing when we're both working on something. And I know I just threw a lot of information at you. So I'm also going to be sending you an engagement letter should you choose to move forward with the hiring process. It will recap everything I just told you, and it'll also contain an estimate of the amount of any future services that we've discussed today. Generally, Autumn and I like to have a meeting after we get off the phone with the potential new client to discuss what we think an estimate for services would be, should we require a retainer, or how much we just think your issue would require in total. So do you have any questions for me about the fee structures?
No, it's all fine. I guess my only question is if this ended up being one of the groups, classes, would the fees be shared, or what would that look like?
Generally, if Libby and I are handling a class matter, we sit with first, let me say, no, you would not be paying to exercise everybody else's rights, should that be the decision. So let me start there. No, you would not be paying for that. And Libby and I then meet with the partners and decide, what does our fee structure need to look like if we're representing this many individuals? Because you would not just be paying for it, doctor.
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect. Do you have any other questions for us?
I don't think so. Not at this time.
All right. Well, then I will let you go and enjoy the rest of your Saturday. The weather looks like it's beautiful out there, so I hope that you have fun plans for the rest of the day.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll wait to get, I guess, the engagement letter stuff by email, and I will collect the things you'd like to see and get them to you.
Thank you. I'll send you that memo over this afternoon.
All right, thanks so much.
Doctor.
Nice to meet you.
I'm just trying to figure out how to get out of your office.
That is all right. The virtual office is a little bit confusing. We completely understand.
And it may take, I'll just go here.
Is she still with us?
Not that I can see.
Okay.
Well, Autumn, what did you think?
I initially was thinking about qualification tests as it relates to race and trying to just rack my brain and see when have I seen this in terms of age. So I thought you did a really poignant job of sort of connecting it to airline pilots and other individuals, but I could not think of anything past Title VII or 1981. What were you thinking?
No, I was kind of on the same page, just going back and forth with those two, especially knowing that, there's those bona fide occupational qualifications. This seems like it's, the purpose is safety, obviously, considering the study was done on medical malpractice claims. So I understand the purpose, but it seems like there's been so much ambiguity on the policy itself that there's a lot of question marks that we need to get answered before we can really give a full legal analysis.
Yeah, there were moments where I felt like it seemed like our role was going to be just helping her navigate this new field. If we couldn't really challenge it, especially as it relates to her privacy. I think she has very valid concerns. Like, if I fail this test, but I'm still, pretty much able to practice, what will that look like? And I also wish we had asked, I would like to do some research on what these tests even look like, or what they really test. Is it multiple choice? Is it dexterity? I don't know. So that's also something we can look into.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what other places are doing, but I feel like we've got our work cut out for us. Definitely going to have to do some research this afternoon. I can get that memo typed up and sent over. And if you want to, on the partners meeting on Monday morning, maybe we can draw up the engagement letter and also discuss that fee structure if there was a class.
Yeah, we should definitely do that, because I'm not sure how it relates to the fact that she could technically go practice somewhere else. But I do know that you have another call to hop on. So we'll get to that meeting on Monday.
All right, I'll see you then.
All right, thanks. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, we are going to do a pre-meeting. So whenever we'll signal for when the client should come in. Is the client currently in the room?
Not, and I will bring her in once you ask me to. I'll be your legal assistant today.
Okay. All right. And so I assume we're good to go.
Sorry, I'm testing my internet. It looked laggy. Okay, I'm ready when you are, Mallory.
Okay. All right. Hi, Brennan. How are you?
Hey, Mallory, I'm good. It's good to see you. How are you doing?
I'm wonderful. It's good to see you as well. Do you have any big plans tonight?
I am very excited to just watch basketball. My bracket's totally done, but I still love the tournament. So I'm just hoping for good games at this point. I don't care who wins. It's already
that's
done,
fair.
but that's all. What about you?
I will probably also end up watching basketball. So
Good, good. It's a good way to spend the day. But
Yeah.
more importantly, first things first, what do we have going on today?
So today we have an Avery Johnson who wants to talk to us about a situation with their employment.
Okay, that is, as civil rights attorneys, we see a lot of discrimination, age, race, sex, something like that. So that could certainly be it. I
Yeah.
don't know what his job is. What are you thinking?
Yeah, no, I'm curious to kind of dig into it. I know employment, that can be really scary for a client. So we need to be, as gentle as possible with
Yeah,
this situation.
It certainly controls almost every aspect of their life, but I'm ready to get started if you are. You want to bring him in?
Absolutely.
All right.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
I can, thank you.
Well, good afternoon. We are so pleased to be able to meet with you today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your Saturday afternoon to be here with us.
Thank you.
Well, my name is Malory-Anne. This is my co-counsel, Brennan Collins. Please feel free to call us by our first names. Is there anything you would prefer for us to call you?
Avery's fine.
Okay, perfect. Well, we're both wearing headphones, so if at any point you're having trouble hearing us, please just let us know. We'll try taking them out to see if that helps, okay?
All right.
So Avery, are you Zooming from home today? Or are you at the office?
I am Zooming from home today.
Zooming from home. So over the last couple of years, have you become a Zoom expert?
Oh, a little bit. I think I can probably manage our appointment here this afternoon, but if you make it too complicated, I might need some instruction.
I will try my very best to not throw anything complicated at you. I do want to say that if we get disconnected, don't panic. If we have any technical difficulties, we have your contact information. We're going to reach out immediately with a solution.
Okay.
I've been told that I'm a little laggy today. That's why I'm trying to figure that out. So if I stutter or if I delay and you miss something, please just tell me. I'll repeat it. We'll figure out what all you missed.
Okay.
But eventually there's going to be a little delay and we'll talk over each other. I'm not meaning to cut you off. It's just that little lag. It gets awkward. It's clunky, but we're just going to push right through. We apologize for that.
So our assistant told us you need to speak with us about a situation at your employment, and I promise we're going to get to that. But before we do, we really just want to get to know you a little bit better. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm a local physician in the area. I'm in private practice. I've been a physician here for 40 years. I, have community involvement with kind of the local faith-based institutions and some nonprofit organizations. So fairly well established in the community. And yeah, that's pretty, I'm kind of a work all the time kind of person. So that's it.
Well, you don't make it 40 years unless you're good at what you do. So
Yeah.
Congratulations on that.
Thank
And
you.
I have heard from some doctor friends of mine that their least favorite place to be is an attorney's office. So have you met with an attorney before?
I have an estate planning attorney. So yes, I have met in that context. Some limited exposure to the attorneys with our insurance, our practices insurance company, but thankfully not often. And so
Okay.
that's kind of it.
So nothing on this issue?
Oh, no, not on this
Okay,
issue.
great. So the reason I asked that is every attorney kind of operates their meetings differently. Obviously, in estate planning, we'll go a little bit differently than this consultation. I'll let Mallory go over our roadmap and kind of explain how we conduct our meetings.
Okay.
So we like to split our initial consultations into 3 main sections. The first section is going to be the fact gathering section. So this is where we're really going to get to the details of your issue. We're going to ask you a lot of questions. That's just to fill in the gaps in our knowledge. Then we're going to move on to your goals. That's what you want to get out of this representation. The reason we do this after the facts is because we often find that our clients' goals, they'll change after talking through some of the details. So that's why we like to put the goals there. And then finally, we're going to give you some legal and some non-legal options that will help you best meet those goals. Okay. And I just want to let you know that we do save our fee discussion until the end of the meeting. The reason we do this is just so we can determine the complexity of your case so that we can recommend the most cost-effective solution for you.
Sounds great.
Great. And speaking of fees, we want to thank you so much for paying the $100 consultation fee that will cover our time here today.
Sure.
And when you paid that consultation fee, you provided us with a list of names, and that's for what we call a conflicts check. This is just to make sure that we've never represented anybody that could be adverse to your interest in this matter. There were no conflicts that came back clean, so don't worry about that. We don't foresee any arising, but as you go forward telling us about your issue, we may stop and ask you to spell out any names or be specific with the last name of anybody that comes up, just so we can keep certain that there are no conflicts. Do you have any questions about that?
Nope, that sounds great.
All right, and it is very important for you to know that Mallory and I owe you a duty of confidentiality, whether you choose to hire us as your attorneys or not. That means that everything that's discussed during this meeting will remain within this virtual room. That is the same for Zoom as it would be if you were here in the office with us. Mallory and I are both alone in our offices with our doors and windows closed. Are you alone as well where no one can hear you?
I am alone, yes.
Okay, good. So this is a secure Zoom link, so don't worry about any information getting out that way. It's not being recorded for that reason. So I will warn you though, if you discuss this issue or meeting with any third parties, or if you post about it on social media, that will not be protected. So be careful who you choose to share information with about this.
Okay, so I presume this is no different than the way I treat my patients, right?
Absolutely, you understand it perfectly. You do it as well. So that's
Okay.
makes it easy on all of us. So Mallory and I will both be taking notes during this meeting. If you see us with our heads down, we promise we're not ignoring you. We're just trying to make sure that we have an accurate record of everything that you say. These notes will also be confidential, so don't worry about anything getting out that way. But please feel free to be as open and as forthcoming as you can, because that's going to help us best give you the best advice possible. I'm sure you've had a patient that's held something back because they were embarrassed or something. It's best to know everything out front. So I threw a lot at you there, but do you have any questions about confidentiality?
I don't think so. Thank you.
Okay. Well, the final thing before we get into what brought you in, I know you're eager to talk about it, is I do want to stress that this is your meeting today. We want you to be in control from the very beginning. Please feel free to ask questions. Let us know if you need anything clarified. If we misspeak on a fact that you've told us, interrupt us and let us know. You're in control, you're in charge, and please let me know if I lag and you miss something. I'm very worried about that.
Okay, I'll be sure and let you know.
Thank you. So with that, go ahead and tell us what brings you in today.
Well, the local university hospital where I have hospital privileges, where all the doctors in my practice have hospital privileges. The hospital's recently announced a new policy that is going to have really huge ramifications for many of the doctors in our community, myself included. And so I think it's totally ridiculous and arbitrary. And we don't have a lot of information about how it's going to ultimately be implemented and play out, but it has me very concerned. And so I'm hoping that you can give me some direction about kind of what to do about it.
Sure, absolutely. And can you give me the name of the university hospital?
So it's just the university hospital that's associated with the private university here. So we just call it University Hospital.
That'll do.
Yeah. There are other hospitals in the area, but that's the largest one.
Okay.
Sure.
So can you tell me a little bit more about this new policy?
Yeah, so I can tell you what I know. It's not very much. The policy basically is that doctors over 70 that want to retain their hospital privileges will have to undergo both cognitive and neurological testing in order to determine their level of fitness for continuing with their same level of hospital privileges. And when they sent out the policy to all the doctors in the area that do procedures and have privileges at their hospital, it was attached to it was one study that suggested that the older doctors got, the more likely they were to have malpractice complaints made against them. And that was the justification of the new policy. But like I said, it's otherwise feels pretty arbitrary. And there are plenty of doctors that work beyond 69, 70 years of age that this is going to have implications for.
Sure, absolutely. I understand that. It's incredibly concerning to kind of, it's almost like they're forcing you out of your profession a little bit once you reach that age.
Yes. And, you know, you never know what you're going to find when you undergo some kind of procedure. And so I think there are a lot of issues about what they're going to do with the information, how it's going to impact our livelihood, the livelihood of our patients. If we can't use that hospital facility to do our procedures anymore. And so we really need guidance here about what to do and how to move forward.
Sure, absolutely.
How old are you, Avery?
I'm 69 years old.
Okay.
Wow. So this is about to have a direct effect on you.
Absolutely.
That's very scary. I'm so sorry to hear that you're experiencing this. Can you tell me when the
Go ahead.
policy was, when you received the information about the policy?
Yeah, so we just got notification of the policy in the last month, and it came in the mail, it came by email. And again, not a lot of other prefacing information, just that this policy was being enacted.
Sure. And I apologize for the personal questions about your age, but I do have to ask, when do you turn 70?
I'll turn 70 early next year.
Early next year? Okay. So we do have a little bit of time to kind of figure this out. Okay.
So Avery, you've been saying a lot of we's. Are you here on behalf of a group of doctors, or have you talked to other doctors that have similar complaints?
Well, I expect that lots of doctors in the community are having the conversation. I'm not currently speaking on their behalf, although the time may come when that needs to happen. I am particularly concerned about my situation. And again, the implications it would have for my practice and my ability to use the big hospital for my patients. We've had some conversation in our private practice about it, but I am the one that it would kind of most recently affect.
Sure. And have you tried to reach out to the hospital about this issue at all?
I've had no contact with the hospital about it at all. I can tell you that the local medical society, I think, is engaging in their own investigation about what it might take and what they need to do, or whether they need to do something on behalf of physicians in the area. I don't know what decisions they've made or what their decision-making will look like.
Sure. And can you also tell me a little bit about the cognitive and the neurological testing?
I can't tell you that much about it. That's all it says, is that there will be cognitive and neurological testing of doctors over 70. It doesn't tell you how often it will happen. It doesn't tell you what they will do with the results. It doesn't tell you if they will be made public. It just says that the results of the testing could result in full revocation of privileges or partial revocation, limited privileges, things like that. So that's all I can really tell you about. It doesn't say like what exactly kind of tests they are.
Sure. Okay.
What is your specialty in medicine?
So I'm a gastroenterologist, and I'm with a private GI practice here in town. But obviously our major procedures have to be done in a hospital setting.
That kind of leads into my next question. I was wondering what you do at your private practice versus what you do in the hospital room at University Hospital.
Yeah, so there are some things that we can do, but our mostly when we're meeting with patients, they're coming in, we're doing consultations, we'll be talking about histories and diet and medications and things like that. But if we have to do biopsies or colonoscopies, things that require anesthesiologists and other types of staff to do the procedure, we would be doing them at University Hospital with their hospital staff.
Sure. And how often do you have to go to the hospital to use their services?
I would tell you that on any given week, one of us is at the hospital.
Okay.
I might do procedures every Thursday, and my partner might do them every Tuesday. So at least once a week, at least every day of the week, one of us is at University Hospital. We would also be there if one of our private practice patients is admitted for some other reason. We might, we might go round on them in the hospital.
Okay.
Can you tell me about your partner? What's her name and how old is she?
So there are 4 partners in the practice.
Four
There are
partners,
6
okay.
doctors total. And I would tell you that the next one closest to my age is 62, and our youngest is about 38.
And do you have the partners' names?
Sure, I can give them all to you, or I can email them to you.
That's okay.
Yeah.
You can just email us later.
Yeah, that's fine. It's for the conflicts check that we mentioned earlier. We just want to make sure that there are no conflicts.
Okay, I'm happy to email them to you.
Sure,
Thank you so much. What is the name of your private practice? I'm sorry, I don't know if we got that.
So it's City Gastroenterology.
Okay. And as I mentioned before, I'm so sorry that you're having to deal with this. I know this is extremely scary for you, and especially considering that they didn't outline exactly what the procedures are.
Yeah, and I have huge concerns about, what they're going to do with that information, whether it would ever be fed back to our malpractice insurance carriers if they detected something, even if it might not be something that would impact our privileges. If they shared that with our malpractice carrier, I don't know what they would do with that. And obviously, without insurance, we're not doctors.
Absolutely.
So can you tell me a little bit more about when you obtain privileges, how you obtain privileges, and more about kind of how privileges work? I'm sorry, I don't know much about that.
Sure. So generally speaking, you get hospital privileges if you're a private practitioner by just submitting information about your licensure, about your insurance coverage. So as long as we kind of maintain our state licensure, then we're going to have privileges at the local hospital. Again, because that's where most major procedures need to be done. And oftentimes you can have privileges at more than one hospital. So we do have privileges at the community hospital and, the VA hospital. We don't go to the VA that often, but we have privileges at all of the local hospitals. But most of our patients are seen at University Hospital, as it's the biggest one in the area.
Is there a contract between you and the hospital?
There's not really a contract. Again, once a year, we do what we have to do for the medical licensing board, and then we just provide information to the hospital that we have complied with the medical licensing board. We're still physicians in good standing, and we have adequate medical malpractice insurance. Sometimes the hospitals will dictate how much coverage we need, but as long as we maintain the coverage they require.
Okay, well, is there anything else that you think is important for us to know at this time?
One of the concerns I have is about a recent diagnosis that may eventually have implications for my ability to do what I currently do. It doesn't impact that now. I'm managing it with the other partners in our practice so that we can make sure there's continuity of care if at any point I need to step away from active practice. But there's a lot of medicine that can be practiced, even if, for instance, I can no longer do colonoscopies or no longer do biopsies or something like that. And so it is a concern that this policy by the hospital is kind of going to be this blanket prohibition or limitation simply because I might reach a certain age. And in the course of this witch hunt, they could find something that very well may impact my ability, but that ought to be up to me and my partners and quite frankly, my private insurance carrier to decide at what point it's no longer safe for me to be doing what I do. I mean, 70 is purely arbitrary. Fauci is 80, and it doesn't look like he's slowing down.
Not a bit.
So I have a lot of privacy concerns about what they're going to do with this information. If they were to find something, whether it's about me or any other doctor, it would be devastating for a physician's practice. If you had to tell your patients you no longer could do their procedure at the major medical center.
So I know that this is very hard on you, and I know it feels very personal, and I'm sorry that I have to ask this, but you mentioned a diagnosis. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I can tell you that I have been diagnosed with an essential tremor, and it just means that, under certain circumstances, I have a tremor in my lower extremities. And again, it's currently not an obstacle to me doing what I do. And when it becomes one, I will make the responsible and professional decision to stop doing certain procedures. And again, the partner with whom I'm in conversation with at my practice is prepared to take over on my procedures when the time comes. But I don't necessarily expect it will be when I turn 70. My diagnosis is such that it still could be a couple of years before that's the issue.
So how are you currently, you said that you're experiencing these tremors. How do you combat that in the operating room, or does it just not bother you being it on your lower extremities?
Yeah, it doesn't really manifest itself as long as, again, I stay rested. I have right now a very low dose of medication that Norzapam that takes care of it. And again, it's not something you would notice if you were my patient. It's not something hopefully that you're noticing now. But if I were to stop the medication, I make sure not to schedule 15 procedures in one day. That's probably not terribly safe under the best of circumstances. So I'm making responsible professional decisions for my career and on behalf of my patients.
Absolutely. And we really appreciate, I know these are really tough questions and this is a very, very personal issue. And so we really appreciate you sharing that with us.
Sure.
Well, Mallory, do you have any more questions right now for Avery?
I don't.
Okay, so Avery, what I want to do now is just read over and recap everything that you've told us that I have written down, just to make sure that we're on the same page. So if you think of anything that's important while I'm reading, let me know. If I misspeak in any way, let me know. We will just want to be on the same page before we move forward, okay? All right, so you're a local physician. You've been in private practice for 40 years. You're a gastroenterologist. Did I say that correctly?
You were close.
Close, GI. We'll go with that. So you have privileges at University Hospital, and you've recently received word through mail and email of a new policy starting next year that employees or doctors over 70 will be having to take a cognitive and neuro testing in order to keep their privileges. You said that they've based this on one medical study, didn't really provide you much more information past that, don't know what the tests are. You just know there are tests and they say a study shows this will help, or you're more likely to be sued if you're over 70. You are 69 years old currently. You will turn 70 early next year when this policy is in place. And you've got this practice and you're worried about you've got a tremor that's developed and you're worried about them determining what the tremor could impact and what they might find on this test for you. And you're worried about losing your privileges and losing your insurance because it's hard to obviously be a doctor if you don't have insurance. Does that kind of sum up everything accurately?
Yeah, I think so. I guess I would also say that there are other studies that have not made the same conclusion that this hospital study has. And so, again, I don't know what is going on at the hospital leadership level. They've kind of cherry picked the study that supports this policy as they would like it to be, but I don't think that study is the last word on this overall issue. And again, it's not going to have just implications for me. It's going to have really widespread implications for a number of people in the medical field.
Yeah, absolutely. So now we're going to move on to the section, the goals section. So could you, you already mentioned some of your goals. Could you, in your own words, tell us your goals for this representation.
I would like to see the policy not take effect. That there be some basis by which this policy cannot take effect. If it is taking effect, I think it needs to be much more clear about kind of what happens, where the information goes, where does it live, who has access to it, what do I have to tell obviously I have to tell my patients if I've lost privileges or have some kind of restricted privileges, but is it on a web page? I mean, who can get that? Do they share that information with the licensing board? Do they share it with my private insurance carrier? Like, what are they going to do with that information? So no policy. If there's a policy, how do we limit kind of what happens to it? And I think those are my goals.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page, you were very clear with your goals, but I just want to read them back to you. So your main goal is to have the policy not take effect at all. And then if by some chance the policy does end up taking effect, there's a lot of blurred lines about how it will take effect, how the tests will be run, and what they're going to do with that information. So we just want to kind of fill in those gaps. Does that make sense? Is that accurate?
Sure. Yeah, I think so.
Okay, perfect.
So what we're going to do now is move into the legal issues section. And that's just kind of where we discuss some of the issues that we have seen and what you've told us. The main one, obviously, is you feel like you have been discriminated against because of your age. There's not really, in your belief, an arbitrary reason for this, except for, like you said, 70 is just a number. They just picked a number, picked an age, and there's no real reason or showing that you've deteriorated in your abilities to perform medicine, and they just picked an age. So you feel like you've been discriminated against. Is that fair to say, because of your age?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think Brennan is spot on with the legal issue. I think this absolutely is an age discrimination issue. And so that being said, there are some legal options that we can discuss today that are really important. And I think, you want to maintain your relationship with is it fair to say that you want to maintain your relationship with the hospital as best you can?
Sure.
Yeah. So that being said, I think one of our first legal options, and we like to start with, some non-legal options first. Those tend to be better at helping those relationships. So I think if we could have a sit-down meeting with the hospital, I think that could help fill in a lot of the gaps of the information. We'll finally have the opportunity to ask some of those questions that they kind of left open. And we can express your concern about the tests. We can express that we think this is an age discrimination policy. I know having attorneys in the room and using the word discrimination can be extremely powerful. And so I think maybe starting with a meeting would be one of the better places to start. How do you feel about that?
Is there any way to kind of keep me out of it? I mean,
Sure.
Again, I am managing my situation as carefully as I know how, but if other people get wind of it, I lose control of the narrative and I lose control of the plan. So is there a way to do it because it affects so many other people, not just me?
Yes, absolutely. And as Brennan mentioned at the beginning, this is your meeting, this is your representation. We're not going to do anything that you're extremely uncomfortable with. We can absolutely set up an anonymous meeting, say, we heard about the policy, these are our concerns, and try to maybe fill in the gaps in our knowledge, have the conversation with them, let them know that we're kind of onto the fact that they're discriminating against their medical professionals that are turning 70 or above into their 70s. And I think that could be a very powerful meeting.
Yeah, I would certainly be more comfortable with that than having my name come up at any point at this point in the conversation.
So I agree with Mallory. I think a meeting is the best place to start. Let them know, we've been reached out to by doctors. We know that this policy is coming into place. We have questions about the cognitive and neuro testing. Lay out our concerns and issues. You can absolutely, it would be critical for you to help us, draft these talking points. Let us know the questions you have and need to be answered, and even teach us kind of the right questions and things to ask, because you're the one with the expertise with the hospital. So I think that is definitely a great place to start. I will say that I think the best thing we can try to do is get an injunction filed as soon as possible with the court. That's just gonna, if the court agrees, we'll reach out and they can say, until we have a chance to rule on this, that you can't put this policy in, because it is illegal to discriminate against somebody for their age in the workplace. There is a Age Discrimination and Employment Act, it's federal law. But the bad news that I will say is that Congress has typically said that these tests are permissible when age is a bona fide occupational qualification. And what that means is that if it could be seen to violate, public policy, the public health, and the employer has to show that they have a substantial basis for believing that employees around this age would lack the qualifications required for the position, or that reliance on an age classification is necessary because it's impractical for the employer to insure you because they have their insurance. So because it's a doctor and you're dealing with the health of patients, they do likely have some decent standing to put forth something. So our best, do you have something you want to ask? I threw a lot at you there. I was going to say that I think our best place to start with this is work with the policy, try to come from a place of, understanding that they have to protect themselves and it is a public health issue, but express our concerns with cognitive and neuro arbitrary tests aren't the best way to handle this. Maybe, something a little more practical, a little more personal. We can look into some tests, maybe not even tests, but some things that might seem more appropriate and less random all over the place.
Yeah, so the question that was kind of coming onto my face, I think, was you were talking about this exception and about being the employer can do this, but I mean, the hospital's not really my employer. I mean, they employ some of the staff that helps us with our procedures. Again, anesthesiologists, nurses, things that we don't keep on staff at our practice, but they're not really my employer.
Yeah, absolutely, because you just have the privilege. That's something we can look into. That might be some gray area that we can tap into and say, but it's likely that I would assume that it's going to be read as they can choose who performs work within their hospital based on these tests, that they're going to have the right to, because of their insurance and the public health. So they're just going to have to overcome that bar. I know that's not the news you wanted to hear. So that's why I think it could be beneficial to set out these talking points, get a meeting. We can still go, we don't have to go in, on a knee conceding, but I don't know how well we would fare in a court case over this. So it might be best to let them know we've got problems with these tests. We think that the tests are arbitrary and you're just looking for something to find, instead of, just assuming and filing suit immediately and potentially losing a court case.
Okay.
Yeah, as Brennan mentioned, I know that's probably not the news you wanted to hear. And, going into court definitely doesn't help with the relationship with the hospital. So I think starting with the meeting is our best opportunity, filling in those gaps in our knowledge. And then we can really go from there.
Okay.
Is that something you think you'll be comfortable with?
Yeah.
And we're absolutely going to do some more research on a lot of those court cases. It's not black and white. This can be kind of a gray area. So I don't want you to assume that all hope is lost and there's absolutely nothing that can be done. There absolutely is. And we're going to work our absolute hardest to figure that out for you.
Okay. All right.
And another thing that we can attack is, you mentioned these other studies that have come to a complete different conclusion. Our best point might not be to say that you can't test. It might be to say there's no test there's no study that showed that 70 is the age where the drop off is. We can maybe fight for 75, or even, as you said, Dr. Fauci, he's 80, push into the 80s and let them know that 70, these tests, it always helps to come with these studies. So we'd love to see those, but we may have more success attacking the age itself and saying that's not the right bar than we do saying testing in general is an age discrimination.
Yeah, because certainly, my initial diagnosis was at younger than 70. So
Yep.
There are any number of diseases or issues that could cause this problem younger than 70.
Absolutely. Well,
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, we do have some documents that we are going to want to get from you. if you don't mind, we'd like to see any kind of contract that you have with your practice in the hospital, if you have anything written down. And we'd love to see a copy of the emails you received stating what the policy is.
And would you like me to attach the studies that we found? That are
I was just
contrary to
about
that?
I was just about to say that any studies we'll do our own research and try to find more, but any studies that you found, I trust your expertise in medical research, so that would be very helpful. And I'd also like to see your insurance agreements for your private practice, and if there's anything with the hospital, but be able to see those insurance agreements.
All right.
Okay, well, we are so pleased that you came in to see us. This is absolutely an issue that I think we can help you with legally. And we're very happy to help. I understand, again, this is incredibly personal to you. And so we're going to make it personal to us. So that being said, we're going to move into our fee agreement. Based on what we've just discussed, I think an hourly rate is going to be the best option for your specific legal issue. We do work as a team, which means that you will be hiring both Brennan and I to work on your case. We charge $200 an hour, and that's for our work separately. We do bill monthly, so you will have a monthly invoice that details exactly what we're doing. And just to kind of give you an estimate as far as research and for the meeting, we're probably going to start out at about 15 hours. So just so that you have that in the back of your mind.
That's fine.
So we would love to be able to meet with you again soon. So if you could send us everything that we've asked for as soon as you possibly can, so we can go ahead and dive right into that. But is there a time, either Wednesday or Thursday, that you think you could meet?
I have patients on Wednesday. I could meet Thursday morning before 11 or after 4.
Which one works better for you? We want to be accommodating.
Morning would be better.
Okay, 9 o'clock, is that okay?
Sounds great.
All right, Thursday morning at 9, and just whenever you can get us those documents, that'd be very helpful.
All right. I'll do
Thank
that.
And so we're going to send you back into the waiting room that you were just in before the meeting so you can review our engagement agreement. So this engagement agreement basically is a document that sets forth the expectations of representation. So that's your expectations for us, our expectations for you, and it will also have that fee structure that I just mentioned in there. So please be aware that we are not officially your attorneys until that document is signed. However, as soon as it is signed, we will immediately start working on your case and really start getting the ball rolling for you, okay?
All right.
Well, Avery, it was so nice to meet you. Thank you for coming in. If you have any questions or if you think of anything else, please don't hesitate to let us know. But if you can't think of anything right now, it was really nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you both too. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
you.
We'll see you on Thursday.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. Wow, that's hard. And that's to hear that at 69, that you're all of a sudden going to be subject to cognitive and neurological testing with no information of the tests.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's incredibly scary.
Yeah, it feels like, definitely, I'm sure she feels like she was blindsided with this coming up in, early next year, turning 70. The thought of being pushed into retirement, not being able to do what she's done for over 40 years is definitely a scary thought.
Yeah.
I hate having to deliver what I perceive as bad news, but I do think it's been pretty clear that these tests are okay as long as the hospital has the rational basis. And typically what it's for the public health. If your doctor's over 70 and has lost a step and fails these steps, that would open them up to a lot of liability.
Yeah.
And so their insurance companies, I'm sure, push these tests. But I'm excited to look into those studies and see what they have to say about, the marker of 70 versus maybe a 75 or an 80.
Yeah, I'm curious to learn how invasive the tests are, because I mean, these tests they have to be reasonable. You can't just say we're going to dive into your brain and figure out every single possible thing that could potentially be wrong with you. So I'm really curious to see to the extent that these tests will be used. And I'm curious to see what they're going to do with that information. Her concern about her private information or her private insurance getting that information, that's a legitimate concern.
Absolutely.
So I'm curious to dig into her policy and to really get the hospital's perspective on these tests.
Yeah, I know that Avery said she had no idea about the cognitive and neuro testing, or that was all she knows. That's all she's been told. Another thing that could be interesting is how many other doctors in the area will be affected by this. If we can get a petition, get a grouping together, strength in numbers might help. Look into that. Get some kind of meeting with a hospital, get a hearing to cure any due process issues. This has just been kind of sprung on them right now. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, I am very eager to get started on this. I think I'm going to start doing a little bit of research on the cognitive tests and on the area to see, exactly how many doctors are going to be affected by this policy.
And I can definitely get started on some of these medical studies about the testing and about the impacts on your age. And I'd also like to look into any case law on these age-based testing, especially in medicine, but even in some other areas like maybe aviation or the law. We could, this is something that we could be thrown one day. So definitely want to look in any cases into these testing to make sure that you stay sharp, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I am very eager to get started on this. I know it's a decently immediate issue. So, it's always a pleasure working with you. I think we have a good structure of how we're going to start. And I'm excited and looking forward to it.
Yeah, I really hope that we can get her some help. She seems like a great person, a great doctor who really cares about her patients. So I'd love to let her keep practicing that medicine.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was always a pleasure working with you, Brennan. I will see you on Thursday.
Sounds good.
Bye.
Bye.
Hello, Team B is ready for our client to come into the room. We would ask that the client keeps the camera off until we call them into the room, as we want to do a quick pre-chat.
Bring her in when you ask for her.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And we're ready to begin whenever the judges are.
You may begin.
Hi, Genesis. How are you?
Hi, Adia. Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. What do we have on the agenda for this afternoon?
So up next, we have Avery Johnson coming in to talk to us about a situation with their employment. So that's all we have for now.
Okay. And you said Avery Johnson. Have we ran a conflict check on that name?
I did. So I ran that preliminary conflict check and everything's checks out. If Avery mentions any additional names, then I'll follow up with them after our meeting and run additional conflict checks as necessary.
Okay, well, that sounds good. Let's go ahead and bring Avery in.
All right.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you today?
Fine, thank you.
Great. My name is Adia. This is my colleague, Genesis. Feel free to call us by our first names throughout today's meeting. How would you like us to refer to you?
Avery is fine.
Okay, perfect, Avery. We both use she, her pronouns. Do you mind sharing your pronouns with us just to make sure we're respecting you throughout today's meeting?
She, her.
Thank you so much for that.
And Avery, I see that you included an email address and a phone number on your intake form. What's the best way to reach you after this meeting if we have any additional questions?
My cell number would be the best way.
Okay, I'll make sure to note that. With that, Adia, do you want to get us started with preliminary matters?
Absolutely. Well, Avery, thank you so much for coming in to meet with us. We have about 30 minutes together, so that's going to give us plenty of time to listen, understand what brought you in to speak with us today, hopefully engage in some dialogue, and then you can leave here with what you came here for, legal advice, right? But like Genesis said, we do want to start with some preliminary matters. First, have you ever worked with an attorney before?
I have an estate planning attorney that handles all our wills and trusts and things like that, and some minimal interaction with the malpractice insurance carrier for our private practice.
Okay. Well, since this is a new firm and we have not engaged with you, we do want to give you an overview of what you can expect during this initial consultation, as well as kind of laying out what the next steps would look like should you choose to retain us. I do want to go ahead and thank you for paying that initial consultation fee. That's going to cover everything we discussed today. And along with that consultation fee comes a duty of confidentiality. And that's just a fancy lawyer way of saying whatever we discuss on this private Zoom link is going to stay between the three of us. And in order to protect that confidentiality, I do want to ask, are you in a room alone with the door closed?
I am.
Perfect. We are both in that same boat. So we will be able to keep all information you share with us in between us. I do have to say that if you do choose to go out and tell a third party about anything that we discuss in this meeting, that cuts off the attorney-client relationship and privilege that we create. So they will not have that same duty to you. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I presume this is much like the patient confidentiality I have with my patients.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and please feel free to interrupt us or ask questions throughout today's meeting. This is your meeting, so we want to make sure that we stay on track with what you want to do today.
And Avery, I know that you've interacted with other attorneys, but I wanted to address why we have two attorneys here today. So at our law firm, we just like to have two attorneys attend a consultation so that we can provide different perspectives and better assess your situation. So that's why we do it that way. And I also want to give you a rundown of what our consultation will look like, because I know different firms do it differently. So first, we'll want to start by establishing what your goals are for today. So just what you hope to get out of this meeting. And then a big portion of this consultation will just be a conversation. We want to hear from you. Please share all details that you want to pertaining to your situation so that we can better assess what we're dealing with. Okay. And we'll also ask some clarifying questions just to make sure that we understand the facts as you present them to us today, and also to ensure that we don't miss anything important that will help us in helping you. Do you have any questions about what we've covered so far?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, so after that, we'll discuss hopefully both non-legal and legal options that best align with your goals. And we'll wrap everything up by discussing next steps. So those are just action items for both you and us. So if you don't have any questions at this time, we can move forward with establishing what your goals are for today.
So my goals would be to prevent a new hospital policy from going into place, if at all possible. And if that's not an option, I guess the other goal would be to clarify and ensure the privacy around the information that this new policy could collect from individual doctors.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're really coming to us to see what are the potential options surrounding this potential policy that could be coming into your hospital. And one, you would like to look at if there's a way to prevent that policy from even coming in, but if not, clarify, I guess, the nuanced details surrounding the policy and what that would mean for privacy of patients, employers, and everyone included. Is that a pretty good idea of what we're looking for?
Yeah, I think when I think about privacy, I'm more concerned about my private data and how that might be extracted as a result of the policy and what happens to it, and the privacy of other physicians, as this doesn't really affect patients or general hospital staff.
Okay, well, now since we're more aligned with what it's going to mean for physicians, why don't you just take us from the beginning and tell us how we got here?
Well, so the University Hospital, which is the largest hospital in the area, has recently sent notification to all physicians that have privileges at that hospital that they plan to start imposing testing requirements for physicians over 70. Once you hit 70, you would be subjected to both cognitive and neurological testing to determine your level of fitness to continue the practice of the medicine, and it could have negative implications for your hospital privileges.
Okay, and how did you find out about this policy, this proposal?
Well, I'm a private physician in the community. I'm in a gastroenterology practice here with 5 other physicians, and we, as well as every private physician in the area that uses University Hospital, we got a mailed copy of the policy, and it was also emailed to us, and attached to the policy was a copy of a study that suggested that the older a doctor got, the more likely they were to have a malpractice complaint made against them.
Okay. And I didn't quite catch it. What do you practice?
I'm a gastroenterologist here, a GI doctor.
And how long have you been practicing?
I'm about 40 years in the community.
Wow, that's amazing. And I'm sure you enjoy it and you're passionate about it. To have done it for 40 years.
Yes, I am passionate about it. If the amount of time I spend doing it is any indication.
Now, you said that you're a private physician. Have you been in private practice for 40 years completely, or have you moved around a little bit?
No, I've been in private practice almost the entirety of my career after my fellowship.
Okay.
So I want to go back to this email and the study that you received. Would you be willing to provide us with the information included in that email?
Sure, I can forward all of that information to you.
Perfect. And who sent that email to you?
It just came from the hospital administration.
Now, Avery, you said that they sent this notice along with the study. When I know earlier we talked about you're looking for a way to prevent this hospital policy. Has the policy already been implemented, or based off of this study, they're talking about implementing it? What, if you remember the specific context of that notice?
Yeah, I think that they plan to implement it beginning the first of the year.
Okay.
They were not seeking feedback.
Now, is this the typical, I guess, procedure going through when you've seen the hospital implement new policies before, considering that you've been there for 40 years? Is this new at all? Do they typically allow feedback to come in?
No, and usually the things coming out around hospital privileges are things like days that the hospital kind of protects for house staff, right, for their procedures, or how to schedule things, or when there might be blackout dates for certain types of procedures. Certainly during the pandemic, there have been kind of administrative notifications, but there's never been anything like this. It's not something that other hospitals in the area have. So even though our practice has privileges at the university hospital and the community hospital and the VA hospital, nobody else is trying to implement one of these kind of random age-based requirements. Obviously, if the university hospital is successful in this, I expect other hospitals might follow suit, even though, we have found studies that do not support the findings of the one study that the university hospital has provided.
So it really sounds like this policy is shocking and kind of took you for a turn when you received it. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to have devastating implications for the medical professionals in the area if, all of us, upon reaching, 70, have to submit ourselves to the university Department of Neurology or whomever is going to administer these tests for determination of whether or not, we're fit to practice medicine. And that's not to mention all the challenges of what are they going to do with the information they find when they administer this test on me? What happens if I don't want to take the test?
And have you had any conversations with your peers or colleagues about this proposal?
So we have been having conversations in our practice about it. I presume other doctors are having the conversation as well. The medical society, I think, is also investigating what their options are on behalf of doctors in the area, but I don't know what their decision-making, practice or procedure is going to be around that. I don't know what action they will ultimately take.
Okay.
Now, I do want to ask you a little bit. You said you're looking for some, I guess, clarifying information regarding what exactly this policy would impose on private physicians who are over the age of 70. Did this study go into anything specifically? Because I know you said this was put out by the university hospital, but did it have anything in the study reflective of private physicians?
No, but, you know, many of us rely on using the university hospital for our procedures. So if we were to lose our privileges, it would mean that many of the kind of more advanced procedures that we do, that we need to be able to do in a hospital setting with, you know, broader hospital staff, anesthesiologists, nurses, things like that, like we wouldn't be able to do them there, which has huge implications for our patient population.
Yeah, that sounds like it would take away some resources from your practice and from other physicians' practice to be able to provide adequate healthcare, right? I want to go into a little bit about what this study says, that singular study that the university hospital is basing its reasoning on. So do you have any information about what that study says, if you had a chance to read even the summary?
Yeah, so all I know is that it basically said that the older that a doctor gets, the higher the medical malpractice complaints are made against physicians. I don't know how broad the study population was. I don't know the other protocols for the study. I just don't know what they were. I don't know if it was a retroactive study or if it was by virtue of self-reporting. I don't know if they relied on information from malpractice insurance carriers. I don't know the methodology.
Okay, that's completely fine. We may be able to look into that a little bit more once you send us that email. I do have a question just about more so about this relationship that you have with the hospital. So how is that relationship established? How do you go about going to the hospital and using the staff, the equipment, the hospital rooms? Can you explain a little bit more about that, please?
Sure. So as a private physician, I can get privileges at hospitals. And again, to kind of use their facilities, use their machinery, use their supportive staff. And I get those privileges really pretty simply, as long as I maintain my medical licensure through the state, and I've met all the requirements that the state imposes on me in terms of CMEs and, you know, paying a bunch of money. As long as I do that and I maintain malpractice insurance that meets the requirements of the hospital, and I prove that I give them my certificate of insurance, then I pretty much have the right. They give me privileges. They then have, there's a scheduling process, and it mostly is online now. And so if I need to do a biopsy or I need to do a colonoscopy or something like that, I would go into the system and have it scheduled, and I would show up at the hospital and the patient would show up, and again, some of their hospital staff would be available to assist in the procedure. And so that's kind of how it works. I would tell you that of the 6 doctors in my practice, usually one of us is at the hospital doing procedures at least every day for some portion of the day. And, the rest of the time we're doing consults and other just medical visits in our own medical offices.
Yeah, you've kind of explained to us the process of how you go about using the universities or the university hospitals resources. Did you have a written contract or anything with the university hospital, kind of laying out what you needed to provide to them in order for you to do these procedures in their facility? I know you said that you've been in private practice for 40 years. But if there was some sort of documentation on how you're using their facilities?
I guess we could produce a copy of like every time we've used it or something like that. But, they just have a list of requirements that doctors have to meet in order to have the privilege. They
Right.
don't guarantee like that we'll schedule our procedures within 48 hours. If we ended up having a patient that needed something in an emergent way, we would just send them directly to the ER. And, we might be able to then rotate in as their attending physician for their GI issues. But if we can't schedule it in the scheduling system, we send them directly and they become a patient of the hospital.
So would this new policy be one of, I guess, those prerequisites that they're now asking you to put forth, along with, making sure you are in the state conduct, making sure your license is still in order, making sure you're scheduling on time. And now they want to put this policy there. Would you say that that's kind of where this new hospital regulation is coming in, or is this a separate issue?
I'm not sure the impact of that distinction.
Okay.
Because it hasn't been implemented yet, I'm not sure. So I don't know if like every January 1st, we need to show we've met the licensing
Right.
requirements. Here's our insurance. And by the way, here are our physicians 70 and older. Let's get them scheduled, or whether they're going to just do it every time a physician hits 70, they're going to schedule it.
Okay.
And they'll revoke privileges if they don't pass these neurological requirements. I just don't know.
And that's perfectly fine. That is something that hopefully once we get a look at that notice, we can look at it a little bit more in depth to see exactly how this policy is going to affect you on paper.
And I just want to clarify, this university that you're referring to, it's the largest public university?
It's not, it's the private university.
Thank you. I wanted to go back to just some of your privacy concerns. I know that you mentioned privacy concerns towards the beginning of our consultation. Would you mind just sharing some of those concerns with us?
Sure. I mean, I'm going to be 70 next year. So if I have to submit to these tests, what are they going to do with those results? Are they going to share those with anybody? Are they going to share the medical record? I'm not a patient generally of them. Are they going to share it with my private practice malpractice carrier? If it impacts my privilege status, are they going to share my privilege status? Will it be on their website? Will I have to report it on my website? I would have to tell patients, right? If they come to me and they need a procedure and I've lost privileges or have limited privileges, I would have to tell them that. I mean, it's going to have huge ramifications for my patient population. The other thing is I have had a recent diagnosis that eventually may impact my ability to practice medicine, but probably not between now and hitting 70. But obviously, if I have to undergo these tests that I'm not otherwise undergoing at the university hospital, even if I'm doing it as part of my private care, so those are the privacy questions and concerns I have.
Yeah, those are completely valid. I wanted to check. I know you said you just received a recent diagnosis. I want to check in on you. How are you doing? You don't have to share what your diagnosis was, but I just want to check in on you because I know a lot of things are going on and this may be very overwhelming.
I would say that, I'm doing fine. It's a condition that is managed. I'm in conversation with the other senior partner in our private practice, and she and I are having conversations about when and if the time comes when doing physical procedures is no longer safe for me or safe for our patients, that she will take over on those. Doctors practice medicine well beyond 70. Fauci's standing up there regularly at 80. So there are plenty of things I can do, even if it starts to be problematic in doing biopsies or colonoscopies or things like that. I can push those procedures to one of the other physicians in my practice, but it seems like that's a decision that I ought to be able to make in consultation with the other doctors in my practice, knowing what our malpractice requirements are and other disclosures that I feel like I need to make. What shouldn't happen is the hospital making these decisions for me before it's necessary, simply because I've hit some random age that they've decided means something.
Yeah, no, I understand this. There's a lot going on right now, but hopefully we'll be able to move through this together. I do want to ask, how many physicians at your private practice will be impacted by this potential policy?
So I'll be the first, turning 70 next year. The next oldest is about 64. And then, they just get younger. I think our youngest physician is like 38.
Okay.
But, if you think about the number of doctors currently with privileges at University Hospital that it's going to impact, we're talking probably a couple hundred,
Wow.
in the next 12 months.
Mhm.
Now, I do want to ask Avery, is there any sort of grievance process at the university that you've seen so far with policies being implemented? I know you said that they didn't really seem this time to be looking for any comment, but is there any way for you all as private physicians to contact the university hospital board?
Not that I know of. I would think that if enough people kind of provided some kind of united front, that might make a difference. But I certainly don't want to be the one carrying that torch, because I don't want my personal situation to overshadow this bigger policy issue. Because I just, quite frankly, it's none of their business until I'm ready to make it their business.
No, and that's very, very fair. This is frustrating, to say the least, and especially considering the way you found out with the timeline you found out. I definitely see your perspective on why this would be detrimental to not only you, but like you said, future doctors in your practice, in your position, and even at the university hospital where people are not private physicians.
And Avery, so just going back to this email one last time, you received the information and the study. Did the email include any information about who you can talk to, or any timeline or time span in which you could talk to someone about this policy at the hospital?
I think it certainly was signed by somebody in the hospital administration staff, and I'm sure there's contact information there. Again, it didn't say for feedback, contact this person or public forum or anything like that. So yes, I'm sure there's some basic information that you would see when I forward you a copy of the email.
Okay, we'll look at it.
Mhm.
Well, I will say, Avery, I think we have a pretty good umbrella cover of what the facts are. I do not have any more questions. Hennesis, are you good on your end?
I just have one question about documents. Would you be able to forward us any handbook or rules that the hospital has offered in terms of policies at the hospital? And it's okay.
I mean, I can certainly ask our practice administrator. I don't know of any, but I'm sure it's a hospital. I'm sure they have them, but it may just be a website.
Okay.
Where they're all housed.
We'll look at the website too.
I'd say that's definitely something that we can also look up ourselves, especially considering you said that you don't want to carry the torch of this. So that research, that's something that we can also do on the back end. But at this time, Avery, what I'm going to do is kind of give you a summary of the facts as we have recognized them, as you have presented them to us. Please feel free to interrupt me if there's something that I forget or that you think is very, very important that we will need in order to best analyze what you've presented us with. After that, we're going to kind of present you with the options that we think best align with your goals of preventing this hospital policy, as well as getting clarity on what this does with your private information that would be, or that you don't know exactly what the hospital would be doing with it if they do implement this policy. Does that sound like a pretty good next steps that we'll be taking in the meeting? Perfect. Well, you are a GI doctor and have been for 40 years in private practice. You use the university hospitals facilities for certain operations. It is a private institution who runs the hospital, but you had more or less in agreement with the university hospital that as long as you were up to date on your license and that you provided time within scheduling, you would be able to use these facilities. There was no promise as to when the facilities could be used, but as long as you stayed in code and kept the scheduling in an adequate fashion, you were good to use these facilities. Recently, you were contacted by mail and by email, receiving notice of a new hospital policy coming in, along with a study that suggested the older doctors get, the more likely they were to have malpractice issues. It came from the hospital directly and didn't really seem to have, or it didn't seem like they were looking for any comment on it. It seemed like they were kind of notifying you, this is coming into play in January, and just to be ready for it. You are concerned yourself because you are going to be turning 70 next year, and you are highly qualified and very competent in your work and do not want to be unfairly subjected to the test that this policy is going to enforce if implemented. So not only would it require you to keep up with everything that I'm sure you do as a doctor already, but now on top of that, they would be requiring testing through the university hospital. So you came to speak with us to figure out if there is a way to prevent this policy, one, but also to gain clarity on what this would mean for your private data that could be collected through the testing that they are claiming that you would need to have in their hospital policy. Is that a pretty good overarching bird's eye view of what we're looking at here?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, if my malpractice carrier were to find out information that is not otherwise required to be disclosed to them, and they pulled our insurance coverage, I mean, that's the end of my career. If you don't have insurance, you're not a doctor. So what they're going to do with that information is pretty critical.
No, and I completely understand, Avery. This is not something that the hospital should take lightly. And you are doing the right thing by coming and talking about what rights you have, not only as a doctor, but as a private citizen that should be respected. I do want to inform you of the Age Discrimination Employment Act. If there's a discrimination of people who are 40 years old or older, an employer is not allowed to do that. In your sector of work in particular, even though this is a private hospital, they would still be barred because this is based off of a protected class, in your case being age. And because they have made this policy that is discriminatory on its face, that is not allowed by this hospital. So I do want to let you know that you did the right thing by coming in and talking to us about how to prevent this hospital policy, is to tell them that it is discriminatory on its face, and to let them know that if they were to move forward through this policy, not only you, but the other physicians, not only at the university hospital, but private physicians who would be barred from using their equipment off of the basis that they don't go through with this neurological testing, they could be facing several lawsuits surrounding that. And I know, as you said, that you are not looking to carry the torch for this. You still want to practice, and it is our goal to give you options that would still allow you to have that opportunity to practice and not put you at the forefront of some huge movement that could come into play if they were to implement this policy, and there would be age discrimination actions. So with that, we do have a few options for you regarding what the next step would be. And I'll pass that over to Hennessy's to kind of get into what we're looking at. That would be the initial next steps that we could take. And then we're going to kind of just want to feel where your head's at to see about how you feel about the options. Everything I said, does that make sense so far?
Yep, sounds good.
Okay.
It sounds like you are interested in one, advocacy or advocating, right? But not carrying the torch, not in that capacity. And it also sounds like you haven't had a conversation yet with hospital administration. So you've received an email, but there hasn't been a conversation yet. So one thing that we would like to put on the table is either starting with a phone call or a meeting, which is the least aggressive way to handle this situation that we have on hand. So one thing that we would do, if you are interested in either having a phone call or a meeting in person, we could prepare you for that meeting on what the law is, and also reading up on these studies that contradict the study that this hospital provided. Is that something that you would be interested in?
This would be a meeting of me and the hospital administration?
So not just you, like I said, you're interested in advocacy. So we would want to rally up other physicians that would also be impacted by this. So this would not be an effort where you would be carrying the torch. We don't want to put you in a situation like that, but we do want to show the hospital that people will be affected, and we want to show that in numbers as well.
Okay, I don't have a problem with that. How do we fund these numbers, and who pays for these numbers?
So we would definitely, if you choose to retain us, we would prepare you. And if other physicians want to reach out to us, we would represent them as well, but those would be separate relationships, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And Avery, I do want to just piggyback off of what Hennessis was saying. This is not something that has to start with 100 doctors, right? This is simply looking forward at maybe just you and that physician that you said that would be turning 64, so was right on the cusp of this policy, as well as the university hospital employees that this would also be affecting. This could be simply reaching out to those people and just having a very calm, nothing that we're demanding anything, but simply having more of a conversation or a public comment as to how this would affect you all individually and what this would look like for future doctors. Because let's face it, we're all getting older, right? We're all eventually going to hit that threshold that they've created, God willing. So in that case, they need to look at what this is going to look like for them, not only today and the doctors that it's going to affect in the next 4 or 5 years, but what this is going to look like long-term and what detriments this could cause to the hospital long-term if they implement that policy. So it would be more of a conversation that we could sit down and have with them so they could reconsider this policy. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. And if this conversation doesn't result in how we want it to resolve, right, we could go the next step, which is holding a town hall. One of the nice things about this Zoom platform is that we can get a lot of people from across the state together to have a conversation. So we would be more than happy to, we've helped other groups host town halls, especially on Zoom. So we would be happy to help you coordinate that along with other physicians, and also manage that and prepare you all for that.
Okay, again, in both of these options, I think it's great. I think it's great to find this group of people and provide a united front. I am concerned about the degree to which I might be coordinating it or organizing it. I do not want to be under the microscope on this one, because I know that I have issues that are going to be on their radar if this policy goes into effect.
And, Avery, maybe that also means, sending a letter, not on behalf of you, right, but on behalf of doctors that this is affecting. That could really look like laying out the law for them on age discrimination, telling them what they're doing is wrong, and kind of giving them a second to meditate on it before we even step in the room and they have to put a face to the pen. Right? That could be another option we can take. We can also file claims, but with that being an option, if we were to file with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, that can face or turn into them telling us that we need to file a lawsuit, and we wouldn't want your name to be on that. So if we're looking at more of kind of an anonymous outcome, it would be more writing that letter, letting them know, hey, this is what we have, and this is what this policy could mean. Then kind of seeing how that plays out. Would that be something that you would be more interested in?
Yeah, I mean, that feels like I just really want this to be about kind of the arbitrary nature of this random 70-year-old policy and less about kind of my particular circumstances, which, may or may not invite more scrutiny than I'm prepared for.
So it sounds like we don't want as much light, right, on you. We don't want to make this about you, but we also do want to represent you and the other physicians, but we don't want to make this about you. And that's completely understandable.
Yeah.
So we just want to see, we want to get to where your head's at. So are you interested more so in this anonymous letter?
Yes, certainly as a first step,
Okay.
just to see where that goes.
And we obviously can make a contingency plan based off of what the letter does. We can have another meeting to see what exactly is moving in the medical community with your ear leaning to it, as well as us doing private research, and have another plan or have another meeting to make sure we know what that next step will look like in further conversations.
Okay.
Yes, so at this time, it sounds like you're interested in this anonymous letter. So we will send you an email within 72 hours, including a summary of our consultation here today. And we will also ask a couple of documents from you. So things that we'll need from you, and again, this will be in the email, and I'll give you a phone call whenever I send that email over, because I know you said phone is better. So we want that email included with the study. We also we'll look at the attachments and we'll read over that email. And we will also want information on any handbook or grievance policy that you may have, but we will look at the website too, just to make sure that we have that. Another thing that we would be interested in is just the list of requirements that you said the hospital has imposed in order for you to keep those privileges. So those are some of the documents that we need. And again, it'll be in the email. And what we will do on our side is look at the email and the attachments, look at other studies that we can attach to that anonymous letter contradicting what their position is. We'll look at the requirements. We'll look at the website and find that grievance procedure in case we need it, if we need to move forward after this anonymous letter. And we'll also look at the language on the requirements. So with that will all be included in the email and also in the engagement letter. Those are the services that we will provide you with. We do charge $200 an hour. And we have payment plans and a fee schedule that we can discuss further in our follow-up phone call. You can review that engagement letter and call us if you have any questions. And when you're ready to hire us, you can sign it and give us a call, and we'll move forward and hopefully trying to resolve this situation and bringing you some peace. How does that sound?
That sounds like a great first start.
And Adrian, you came at a great time, right? We have several months that we have time to focus on this and be able to walk through that. I do just want to remind you of that duty of confidentiality, right? So if you do choose to go out and speak to other doctors, that duty that we have together does not extend to them. So anything you tell them, they can be called to speak on. I just want you to keep that in mind. There would be certain situations where, like, as we've talked about in our solutions, that could require us to talk to other doctors, but we can create a privilege with them as well in order to keep that information from spreading. But I did just want to put that on your radar as you move forward with making your decision on how we proceed, given first dealing with the letter.
Okay, no, that's helpful for me to be reminded of. So I could talk to other doctors probably about the policy generally, because I'm not really disclosing anything that I'm particularly keen to keep private, as long as I don't start talking about my own medical situation.
Exactly. You got it. Well,
All
Avery,
right.
thank you so much for coming in to speak with us today. We look forward to working with you, and we will set up another meeting just to kind of talk a little bit more through that notice and the email once we get a chance to view it as well.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time today.
Great. I'll give you a call when we send that email. Bye-bye.
All right. I look forward to it. Thank you.
Yeah, so this has age discrimination all over it, especially pertaining to the hospital policy. I do want to do a little bit of research into HIPAA and how far that would go regarding her privacy rights, considering if they're running testing on her, would she be considered to be a patient? And if that's the case, they cannot share that medical data. But I think once we get the notice, we'll be able to understand that with a little bit more clarity.
That's a very good point. And I just want to make sure that when we follow up with her, we figure out a contingency plan in case this does pass as a policy. So with that, I'll get started on looking at those studies, and hopefully I'll send over that email within 72 hours and give her a call.
Okay, sounds good to me. I'll talk to you later.
All right, bye, Adia.
Bye.
So we have all of our competitors that competed. And so what we're going to do, I'm going to start and let the judges introduce themselves for just a minute, and maybe what kind of law they practice or where they come from, and how long they've been practicing, that kind of good stuff. And then I will turn it over to them also to do some critiques. So Judge Cozart, you want to start?
Thank you. Yes. Good afternoon. It was a pleasure being here and an honor. I practice currently in Florida. I'm a trial lawyer. I've done personal injury for the last probably 20 years. Before that, I prosecuted and was actually a public defender for a year. I'm licensed in 4 states. So I've interviewed many different types of clients through my practicing years. And that's all you need to know about how long I practice. More than 2. But everyone did a really good job today, and I was really glad to be asked to participate in this.
Judge Parsonage.
Yes, I echo that. What a pleasure to be able to do this. Maybe the only time in my life I get to be judge. So I need to remember to take that off before I do my next court Zoom here in case I get in trouble. I practice in North Carolina. I'm based in Winston-Salem. I'm primarily an immigration attorney. I do some appellate work at the circuit courts. But I spent my first at least 2 years out of law school doing employment law intakes, entirely coincidental. But so I really did appreciate how well you all did with this one, and it was a great pleasure to and an honor to be asked to judge this. So well done, everybody. You did a great job.
And Judge Killian.
I'm Kathy Killian. I'm the clinical director for the North Carolina Lawyer Assistance Program. I've worked with lawyers for a very long time. So without being a lawyer, I think I know you guys pretty well. This is my 3rd or 4th time as a judge, and I always really enjoy it. Thank you, Didi, for asking me again, and thank you guys for all your hard work to get here. So it's a privilege and an honor, like the other 2 have said, to be a part of this. So congratulations to you all. I about fell out when she told me how many 100 and whatever teams to start with. So wherever you rank, no, you are definitely a winner.
Absolutely.
So maybe we can just start with your feedback, however you judges want to give that, and go for it.
I think I'm going first. And I think what we're going to do is each of us just generically a positive and maybe an area of improvement. I thought overall everyone developed the facts and got to a conclusion or a suggestion of how they wanted to approach the case. Some of that came in the post-interview when there was conversations between the two associates. And I thought that was done really well on all fronts of the teams. Specifically, I think some of the things that could have been developed differently, and again, you're looking at an issue that you have a client who's very timid and apprehensive of getting themselves out there. So litigation probably is going to be a last resort, but I think it's definitely something you'd want to address with the client, that if perhaps this anonymous approach doesn't give you the satisfaction that you're looking for, are you willing to go the next step? Because that would be some type or some form. It could even be an administrative type hearing of litigation where that personal issue that this client is very protective of is going to come out. And I think that that's something that they should at least be aware of going into this. You just have to assume that they don't know anything about what their available remedies are. And maybe just a side note, the law itself, although it's important when you are doing your research analysis, maybe not get too caught up with that with the client. Sometimes it really does go over their heads. Your client obviously is very intelligent, a very accomplished physician, but sometimes, they do too. It's very esoteric in their own field. So like you'd want your doctor to talk to you in lay terms, talk to your clients in lay terms. I think the easy language is best. And that's the two comments I had. Thank you.
And I can make a couple of generic comments. Again, I mean, everybody worked well as teams, which is even more impressive when you're in separate spaces and you're not actually got that back and forth. So, and who knows whether you're going to have to keep doing that, so I think we're all going to do it at some level. So that ability to try and set up some kind of rapport with your colleague and present as a team when you might not even be in the same building or town is great. And obviously you've had way too much practice at presenting on Zoom. That's a shame. The other area I think, for constructive criticism is, Judge Kozart mentioned, reading the client when it comes to what I would call technobabble. Don't blind them with technobabble, but also you've got to be trying to read the client in a form, sort of the emotional intelligence part of it, which is important. Lawyers are reading judges' body language all the time, but you're also reading your client's body language. And when your client's body language is telling you that they've kind of shut down because they're not following, you've got to, that's something for the future to really pick up. And again, that's easier in person than it is over a small screen. I understand that. But a consultation is as much about making that connection and reading your client as anything else. But those are all skills that come with time, and you all did really well. So, Judge Killian.
Yeah, just tagging on to what she was saying, that sometimes we get caught up in getting this and this and this and aren't really paying attention to that body language and whatnot. Obviously that's a big issue in my line of work, but I think so in your guys too. I think you all did a good job of trying to get the information and the feelings and all that from the client though. It's just a matter of then, are you picking up on, what you're seeing? And because I think, 8% of our communication is verbal. The rest of it is body language and all those other nonverbals. So, and I think, in my world, the biggest factor with whether I'm effective as a clinician is the rapport I establish with the client. And I don't think it's a whole lot different sometimes in your world. And so one of the ways you do that is by being very genuine, being personable and affirming and all is great, but sometimes we can go a little extreme one way or the other with that. It's a serious topic, but you don't want to be so serious as to, scare them to death. And so just being genuine, I think, is really important for all of you to figure out as you mature in your professional way and finding your style. And that will give you a lot more success than trying to emulate something or somebody that's really not you. So, and I think you all did a pretty good job with that.
All right, well, I know the results. Would you like me to read them, or is one of the judges prepared to do it?
We're going to let you.
We'd like you to do it.
All right. So the results are in, and let me make sure. Coming in third is Team B. Team B is in boy. And I am told that Team B hails from Campbell University.
Ah, great.
Coming in second is Team K from University of Houston. And given the look on Mallory's face, she knows that Team J is first from Mercer. And so those are the results. You'll see them also in the chat in case you didn't understand where you were from. Y'all did an awesome job. It was no secret when I showed up as Dr. Avery. We had a little bit of a challenge with our final round client. Luckily, because we write the problems and I read them a dozen times before they get to you, we did a quick change, and except for trying to convince people I was almost 70 years old, you all rolled with it and didn't let that catch you off your stride. And I thought you all did, because I got to see you all, I thought you all did a great job. And thank you judges, thank you subcommittee, those of you that are still on it, Erica with the ABA, and thank you competitors. You'll be getting your swag eventually from the ABA in the mail for your glass cabinets at your law school. You all should be proud and contact your coaches and deans and let them know that you got to the final round and you all placed, and it was very impressive.
Right.
So, all righty. Well, that concludes the national competition. And I hope it's the last one that we have to do on the Zoom machine. I hope we're all back in person next year and look forward to seeing you all then.
Congratulations, all of you.
Everyone.
Well done.